Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist BBQ. I'm Jeremy Yoder, and today I'm going to give you the top 5 mistakes that people make when managing their fire. Before we jump into today's video, I want to thank our sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare, if you don't know what it is, it's an online learning community with millions of users and thousands of classes that you can use to learn new things that can inspire you to pursue a dream that maybe you haven't pursued until now. I took a class, iPhone Filmmaking by Caleb Babcock and Niles Gray, and I used that while I was in the mountains in Colorado to film my elk hunt. It was tremendously helpful. I highly recommend it. So if you want to learn how to paint, if you want to learn how to start a business, if you want to learn how to make a perfect cup of coffee, Skillshare offers those opportunities to you in a non-traditional way. Now, the first 1,000 of my subscribers who click on the link below get a free trial of Skillshare Premium, and after, if you get an annual membership, it's less than $10 a month. So you get a tremendous amount of opportunity to learn the things that you actually care about, rather than being in school and forced to learn things that you didn't care about, and it's less than $10 a month. It is a steal of a deal, and I highly recommend it. I use it myself, and I recommend it to all my friends and family. Number 5. This is one that happens all the time. It is removing your meat too early from the smoker. So a lot of times people will say, okay, I need to smoke it for 3 hours and then I wrap in foil, or I need to smoke this brisket for 6 hours and then I have to wrap it. Don't worry about the time. Okay, look at the color of the meat that you're cooking. So for ribs, you want a deep red color. For brisket, you want a dark, almost black color before you wrap. So what you want is to get lots of smoke flavor on that piece of meat. That's the whole reason you're smoking it in the first place. And if you remove it too early from the smoke because you're following a guide or a recipe, you might be shortchanging yourself and all the effort that you put in. Mistake number 4, mismanaging your airflow. Now, in offset smokers, you treat them differently than you do, say, something like a Kamado or a Weber kettle or a Weber Smoky Mountain or something like that. You restrict airflow in non-offset smokers because that's how you control the temperature. In offset smokers, you control the temperature by how much fuel you add. And so what I see a lot of times is people mismanaging how they use their offset smokers, because what they end up doing is they end up closing down the vent for the firebox, and maybe they close down the chimney, and they're restricting airflow because their temperatures are getting out of hand. Instead of doing that, what you need to do is restrict the temperature by how much fuel you put in the smoker. Now, I stopped at a barbecue spot. This is just an anecdote. But I stopped at a barbecue spot the other day, and I pull into this parking lot where the guy was set up, and then I see the smokestack on his pit, and he has an offset smoker, but I see billowing gross white smoke coming out of it. I didn't even get out of the car. I started the engine again and drove home. Because if you're mismanaging the fire in your smoker, especially in offset smokers, you're going to have disastrous results. Things are going to taste bitter and gross and not the way you want them to taste. So know the kind of pit you have and how you should manage the airflow. In offset smokers, you should have lots of airflow to make sure you burn a clean fire. In other kinds of smokers, you're going to have to restrict the airflow so that you don't have runaway temperatures. Mistake number 3 is wild temperature swings. Now, this can happen in any kind of smoker. It can happen in offsets, it can happen in barrel cookers, it can happen in any kind of smoker that you're using, but what's important is that you keep the temperature consistent. The reason you want to keep the temperature consistent is because if you go too hot, you can burn the meat that you've invested so much time in. If it drops too low, what can happen is you're just drying out the meat and you're not pushing the cook further along, and you're not getting as much smoke flavor as you could otherwise. It's generally easy once you get it locked in other kinds of cookers where you adjust the vents, but in offset smokers, you have to be extremely diligent about managing the fire. It's a very hands-on process. So make sure you're watching your temperature gauges so that you know and get a good feel for how much wood you need to raise the temperature, whatever the amount is, okay? And then also, you have to understand that the temperature is going to fluctuate, but in a curve. So when my temperature starts going down, I add a log to the fire. I don't wait for it to get too low, and that way you can keep the temperature in something this size, plus or minus 5 degrees, maybe 10 degrees. But what you don't want to happen is the smoker to be up at 300, and then you wait till it drops down to 225, and then you add a bunch of wood, and then it jumps to 325, and you're fighting with it. Don't let the fire swing out of control. Basically, use smaller pieces of wood if that's what's necessary to keep the smoker temperature consistent. Mistake number 2, using the wrong wood. Now this has 2 parts. The first part is the size of the wood that you use. So you don't want to use the same size wood in a 500-gallon offset like this as you would in a tiny, teensy, very thin backyard offset. So you have to find the right size. For this, I can use big splits. They can be 18 inches long. Not a problem. But in a regular backyard offset, you're going to want to cut those down. You don't want them to be this thick. You want them to be small enough so that they burn cleanly and efficiently. And then also, for a regular backyard offset, I think wood chips are probably the wrong choice because they don't give you enough clean burning smoke flavor, what happens is they smoke really quickly, then all the flavor is gone and you're just cooking with charcoal. So the size of your pit usually determines the size of the wood chunks that you're going to use. So for a backyard smoker, you might have a base of charcoal and add kind of baseball or softball sized wood chunks. Or you might take splits and cut them down, cut them in half, get them small enough so that they'll fit in the firebox and burn cleanly. The second part of the wood choice is the wood itself. Is this a good smoking wood? Is it a hickory or a pecan or a cherry or an oak or even almond? Or there are lots of choices, but make sure you have a good hardwood. A lot of people will just use wood that they found somewhere or somebody gave to them and they wonder why their barbecue doesn't taste very good. And then also as part of that, you need to make sure that the moisture content of your wood is correct. So you don't want super green wood and you don't want super bone dry wood. Ideally somewhere in the 20 to 25% range. That's going to produce the best flavor in the end product. And if you want to know how to test how much moisture is in the wood, you can use a wood moisture meter. I'll put one in the description down below so you can get it and so you can know what percent moisture your wood has and you don't just have to guess. After you've handled, thousands of pieces of wood, then you're pretty good at picking it up and by feel knowing if it's ready or if it still needs more time. Mistake number one, burning the wrong kind of fire. Now I could talk for an hour about this, but I want to keep it short and concise. When people get on the internet and they try to figure out how to run their smokers, a lot of times they'll find great information. Sometimes they'll find great information, but not for their kind of smoker. So, for instance, if you go online and you see how Aaron Franklin manages a fire in his 1,000-gallon pits, you might think, well, if it's good enough for Aaron Franklin, it should be good enough for my cheap offset. Unfortunately, that's not the case because you don't want to burn an all wood fire in a cheap offset. Number one, you get wild temperature swings because every time you put on a new piece, you get a lot of flame and you have a big swing in temperature. You don't want to do that. Number two is it's so hard to burn a clean fire in one of those kinds of smokers. It's just not the right kind of fire to build. So I would say for that, you'd want a bed of charcoal and then you add wood for flavor. And I'm doing another video very soon on exactly how I run the fire in a cheap offset versus a high quality backyard offset versus a humongous 500 or 1,000 gallon offset pit. And the other mistake I see frequently is people treating their offset smokers like they treated their Weber Smoky Mountain or Kamado Joe. What they do is they, close the vents down as part of the airflow problem that I talked about earlier. So you have to figure out what kind of fire you want to have in your smoker that fits how your smoker is designed to be used. As a general rule, you should strive to burn an all wood fire in your offsets, but if the offset is too small and the metal is too thin, then you're going to have to make a compromise and use charcoal. For big offsets, of course, you're going to use all wood because it's going to be the best in terms of heat production and flavor. And in other smokers where you have vents on the top and the bottom, say Weber Smoky Mountain, Kamado Joe, Big Green Egg, any kind of drum smoker, you're going to want to make sure that you regulate the temperature by the vents themselves. And the last part of this is a lot of times I get questions from people who say, I have a Weber kettle. How do I get clean smoke? Well, when we're talking about clean smoke versus dirty smoke, what we're really talking about is the world of offset smokers. There's no real way to get clean smoke out of something where you have to restrict the airflow. Clean smoke is when you have so much airflow that the wood burns completely and you get all those delicious flavorful compounds that make offset smokers kind of the king of barbecue. That's not to say that you can't make great barbecue on other smokers. It's just that when we're discussing clean versus dirty, we're talking about offset smokers. We're not talking about all those other kinds of smokers that people use and have made great barbecue with. That's all I've got for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments other kinds of videos where you want me to list out my top this or the biggest mistakes here or the best way to do this. I'm happy to make those for you. Just let me know what you want to see. If you enjoyed the video, if you found it helpful, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notification bell on so you get notified every time I put out new barbecue content. Finally, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Mad Scientist BBQ. I'll see you guys next time.